Well, hello, good evening and welcome to the program. This is Daily Politics on Trust TV. I'm Abdullahi Ahmed. Thank you most kindly for joining us. Tonight on the program, our focus is on the rise in attacks across parts of Nigeria. In the last 48 to 72 hours, we've seen ambushes, killings and abductions targeting civilians as well as security personnel. The kidnapping of 25 female students of Government Girls Comprehensive Secondary School in Maga in Danko Asagu, local government area of Kebbi State, after the killing of the vice principal, has triggered another nationwide backlash over the performance of the security forces. Now, this comes on the heels of fresh attacks in Zamfara and Niger State and the release of a video showing an ISWAP abducted brigade commander who was reportedly killed later. Tonight on the program, we speak to a national security and defense management scholar, Dr. Ayokunle Fagbemi, on what these incidents and Nigeria's current battle with insecurity represents for Nigeria and Nigerians. But first things first, let's bring you up to speed with the latest developments in the polity.
The faction of the People's Democratic Party loyal to FCT Minister Nyesom Wike has rejected the expulsion of prominent party leaders at Saturday's convention in Ibadan. 4 state chapters also opposed the convention outcome, seen as resistance to Governor Seyi Makinde's bid to control the party. Over 3,000 delegates attended the Ibadan gathering despite conflicting court orders. The U.S. House of Representatives Subcommittee on Africa would hold a hearing on Thursday, November 20, 2025, to review President Donald Trump's redesignation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern, CPC. If ratified by the Senate, the designation could allow sanctions on officials involved in religious persecution and restrict certain forms of U.S.-Nigeria cooperation. It signals ongoing threats to religious freedom in Nigeria. Right Honorable Kizito Bonzena, Speaker of the Taraba State House of Assembly, has resigned from the PDP and joined the APC. He cited national-level factionalism in the PDP as the reason. 15 other PDP House members have also submitted letters to defect to the APC. Bandits attacked the Government Girls Comprehensive Senior Secondary School, GGCSS, in Maga, Danko Asagu, Kebbi State, killing Vice Principal Hassan Yakubu Makuku and abducting 25 students. Maga have been targeted in multiple attacks recently, highlighting the persistent security threat in the area.
Right, that Kebbi attack and a host of some of the other stories making the day's news will be a part of our conversation. But also, let's have a listen to this week's edition of State of the Nation with Dr. Hakim Baba Ahmed.
There's information that one part of the PDP, the People's Democratic Party, appears to have successfully concluded a national convention involving a huge number of states, chapters, and a lot of the influential members of the party, including governors. Ordinarily, this should be cheery news, particularly for those who monitor the health of our democratic system. The existence of an opposition party, a virile, strong opposition party, is very, very important for the health of our democracy. I want to talk about the PDP's convention first, and then I would like to raise 2 other issues that are also important to the manner in which our democratic processes and systems are evolving. First, the PDP. We could say hallelujah at this stage that at least a faction or a group of PDP people were able to go to Oyo State, gather that number of delegates and hold a convention in the middle of some massive quarrel over the impact of the judicial process on the way political parties operate. So, are we out of the woods yet? At this stage, I think we shouldn't rush into judgment. Almost certainly, the ruling party, which has leaned very heavily on the PDP, literally pauperized it, weakened it, is not likely to just simply clap and cheer what had happened in Oyo State and walk away. So we should expect that the APC is going to continue to lay ambushes and to make attempts to weaken the PDP. How the people who went to Oyo State, they elected a national chairman and other officers of the PD, how they react will depend substantially on the degree to which Nigerians support the existence of an opposition party or opposition as a whole, their own commitment to what the PDP is or what remains of the PDP, as well as, and this is the second point today, as well as the degree to which the judiciary imposes upon itself the discipline and the responsibility to make sure that it is not used as a tool for short-term political gains by politicians. I say this with all sensitivity and respect for the judiciary. Ordinarily, Nigerians should respect the judiciary enough to say, please, you are a public institution, you're central to the manner in which everything in this country operates or doesn't operate. When it comes to the democratic process, which is one of the most sensitive areas where the judiciary has a massive say, it is important that the judiciary operates with the highest levels of integrity and competence. The judiciary must not let itself be used or continue to be used, if it is being used, by politicians. The judiciary alone can destroy the democratic process to the degree that it lends itself to those people who can compromise it, corrupt it, or buy it. This is very important. So in the next few weeks, Nigerians should watch and see what the judiciary says in the almost certain possibility that someone somewhere within the PDP will go to court to say what happened in Oyo State is illegal, and the election should be nullified, the convention should be ignored, and INEC should not even recognize those who are elected. Now, this is very important. You cannot impose on the judiciary a judgment or a decision that it has not even dealt with. But we have enough evidence on the ground to expect that the judiciary will be challenged to interpret what had happened in Oyo State and to make its position very clear. We can see already that there are pending cases. This convention in Oyo State took place in the context of conflicting judgments. So we want to wait and see.
Dr. Abdullahi Ahmed there with this week's State of the Nation, talking about the fallout of the PDP convention, but ending on that point about the stake of the Nigerian judiciary in safeguarding democratic principles, as well as some of the culture that has become part of Nigerian politics. Well, let's switch gears and talk about even bigger issues, because Nigeria's national security is once again on the front burner. This past week, as is the case with the last couple of months, has been inundated with quite a good number of disturbing headlines from the northwest to the northeast and to the north central, where we're seeing a scaling up of attacks on communities, on schools. The most recent case in Maga, in Dankowasagu in Kebbi State, alongside the attacks that have been recorded in the northeast, in Borno State to be precise, the ISWAP Boko Haram attacks against one another, but most recently an attack on a military convoy, leading to the confirmation of the killing of that brigade commander. But also in Katsina State, where 3 more councils have joined the list of local councils to sign or at least negotiate peace deals with bandits, bringing the total to 20 out of Katsina's 34 local councils. You can see some of the pictures there from over the weekend, and how this is signposting governmental failure alongside some of the other issues that continues to give rise to Nigeria's insecurity. Let's bring in our guest. Dr. Ayokunle Fagbemi is here to give us insight on this and many of the other ancillary issues around Nigeria's insecurity. Doctor, it's good to see you this evening. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you very much for having me, and I do want to appreciate you folks for your persistence on making sure that you call on me.
Right.
I'm here now.
And we're happy to have you. First things first, your 2 cents on where we are right now as a nation. The last couple of weeks, if not over a month ago, has been inundated by one particular issue, one that was re-echoed by the United States and gave Nigeria's national security challenge a new perspective regarding the genocide claims. But beyond that, one thing Nigerians apparently agree on, whether people in government, people in opposition, ordinary Nigerians, rich Nigerians, wherever the categorization is that Nigeria has a security problem. How do you situate where we are right now as a nation, especially talking about security?
I must thank the Trust Media Group for your professionalism and the way you have followed on the issues of national security in Nigeria. It is on record that your group happens to be one of the many few entities that are using the right labels to project some of these episodes and incidents. And basically, you've attempted to, in the last couple of weeks, to maintain a safe balance in your reportage. And this is very credible, and we must commend you. Where we are as a country is very simple. We appear to be a country where we have legal and policy frameworks, but those who swore to protect the Constitution and uphold the integrity of the Nigerian state are deliberately failing to observe the provisions of these legal and policy frameworks. That is the bane of why we are where we are today, and this gives room for the politicization of security-related issues and the grandstanding therefrom. That is why we are where we are today. For example, you referred to the episode where the President of the United States drew attention to the fact that there were a series of security breaches and that there is a pattern that appeared to have emerged and some people were being killed. Now, for crying aloud, we suddenly had a situation where Nigerian government functionaries, officials of the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Nigerian state, are now arguing that no, the number of those of that demography of the citizens of Nigeria killed is not as much. Haba. That is very sad, and I never expected a certain Daniel Bwala of all people to fall into that category.
That was a poor defense?
That was a very poor defense. Number one is for us to acknowledge that we were having security breaches. The loss of one life is too many at any point in time. And then we were supposed to take a look and take a stock on what we were dealing with. Now we are now having, immediately afterwards, series of security breaches. And these security breaches are happening in such a manner that is trying to confirm the politicization and the grandstanding that we have been involved in the last couple of weeks in reaction to that particular episode. Meaning, therefore, that these so-called security risk concerned elements that have been wrongly labeled as insurgents, that have been wrongly labeled as bandits, have been wrongly labeled as just being militia groups. They are criminals by the statute of the Nigerian state, because when they go into a community, we just reported what happened in a secondary school. They entered into the compound of that secondary school by the provisions of the criminal and penal codes. When you enter into a compound that is not your own and you commit crime, it means that not only have you trespassed, your nature, the nature and character of your trespass is criminal. And when you now commit crimes in that, what are the nature of the crime that were committed? Somebody was killed, the vice principal was killed. That is homicide. It means that you committed the crime of killing an individual, a Nigerian. You abducted, that is kidnapping. What we should be talking about is for the government to be interested in investigating, and then you'll ask yourself, how come this school was left unprotected? Meanwhile, we've been made to understand severally by the National Security Advisor, by the managers of the Defense Information Management System, that we have a safe school initiative, which meant that schools were supposed to be protected. If schools were being protected, how come this school was not protected to the extent that they can come and encroach onto that property? They can encroach onto that property and commit crime, and commit the crime of taking the life of a principal that was trying to defend these students from being abducted, and eventually they abducted these children that were supposed to be in school. And mind you, if we were discussing national security strictly from development angle, we would have known that for Kebbi State, where the school enrollment is at the sub-minimal level, we needed to ensure that we protected those children that enroll in school and say they want education, mindful of the fact that education is supposed to bring about development.
Right. And just to double down on the question you were raising earlier about labeling, which I suppose is in another way a form of diagnosis. Why does it matter? Why do these labels matter? Whether we call them bandits, militants, ISWAP, Boko Haram, terrorists, why does the labeling matter?
The labeling matters a great deal because you'll be able to situate them correctly, and your response will be within the framework of what you are dealing with. I'll give you a background. Like Governor Bala Mohammed of Bauchi State has come to acknowledge the fact that his state belongs to the Sahel region, and that within the context of security dynamics and development, the Sahel region that his state is located in is bedeviled with a number of security challenges that are inimical to development. And Governor Bala Mohammed has developed a mechanism that is very responsive, and he says once it is a crime, it is a crime. And so he has done what is supposed to be done. You activate all the multi-state, multi-sector, multi-track, the multi-dimensional, multivariate security apparatus that is supposed to have been activated in such a way that you can combine your local, indigenous, and informal security operational system with the formal and statutory. And once you can do that, you'll begin to see how these issues of security breaches are nipped in the bud. When you take a look at the jurisdictions, like in Kebbi, Katsina, that you are having these dynamics manifest seriously, you see state failure. Whereas a certain Governor Bala Mohammed is interested in ensuring that he joins forces with the ward and district heads to ensure that it brings about serious integrated security management. A Kebbi state, a Katsina state, they are not doing that. And that is why in Katsina, you will have 60% of all the states in terms of 20 local government areas out of 34 now entering directly into peace deals. And mind you, when
does that represent a failure? Pardon the interruption. Does that represent some sort of failure or an acceptance that this is now the new way of doing things?
Painfully, and I've said this some 4 or 5 years before now, scientifically, Nigeria is a failed state. Nigeria is a failed state.
What are the parameters?
The parameters is when you allow non-state actors to have the power, the coercive power, beyond that which the state is supposed to operate in monopoly. And you can see it, and you showed the clips as part of our program, wherein you saw this security risk concerns person, and thank you very much for bringing this. You can see them with guns, firearms that they are not supposed to be carrying based on the provisions of the Nigerian legal framework called the Firearms Act. You are not supposed to carry a gun like AK-47 as a citizen, as an individual. It can only be carried by those who are authorized as part of security law enforcement or military and defense mechanism. You see them carrying RPGs. It means, therefore, that the Nigerian security law enforcement system has failed, because ideally these people are the ones that we should apprehend, we should prosecute, and we should ask questions: how did they get this kind of firearms? And let's begin to talk about the solutions. If we can see this kind of firearms out, which ought to be the legal possession of state entities, it ought to be part of what should be in the armories of the Nigerian military and security law enforcement system. Then we need to go back to the Firearms Act. The Firearms Act says you need to do a firearms audit. When last did we do a firearms audit? When last did we do the audit that will make us answer the question, where are the people that either to have served as armorers of those firearms?
There's a good chance that this could be firearms that are supposed to be in the possession of the Nigerian security forces.
Such audit that will allow us to be able to answer this question. More so that the National Assembly at a stage helped us to understand that some firearms that ought to be in the armory of the Nigerian police cannot be accounted for. When the National Assembly that has oversight functions start talking about the fact that they do not have a clear-cut understanding on what has happened to the firearms that ought to have been in the armory of the Nigerian police force, we need to interrogate this a lot more. And the Firearms Act says we need to do this. And this is where you now begin to ask questions about why are they able to continue with this kind of nonsense that is happening in this country. When you look at it, the moment you do not label properly, you are not likely to prosecute because you cannot apprehend based on a thorough investigation. I'll give you a good example. One of the few things that we've been talking in the last couple of weeks is to say, oh, X number were killed in this place. Y number killed. Oh, they were massively buried. It was a mass burial, blah, blah, blah. But the question is, when you pick the criminal code, the penal code, and you situate them within the Nigerian Police Act and the police regulations, you have questions to ask. For example, we need to ask the question, where was the divisional police officer for the local government wherein these students were abducted during that period? How come such a thing will happen? If the DPO was not available, was the divisional crime officer available? When you look at it, the incident report that they should have they filed this normal incident report? Can the National Security Advisor openly show us that he has received a copy of the first incident report that was generated at the local government area? He cannot.
You're saying this is a systemic failure.
There's a systemic failure, and that's why I'm trying to bring us to speed with the fact that if they were applying all this, particularly Regulation 420 of the Nigerian police system, Regulation 420 says that when suddenly you have homicide, people were killed in unnatural circumstances, that particular body must be subjected to thorough investigation. So you can know that, okay, this man was killed and he received some machete cut, or he received a bullet wound and the bullet penetrated from his back, meaning that this man was running away from the assailants. It therefore means that that man was killed in cold blood. If he was killed in cold blood, the kind and nature of the investigation that you will deploy will be different. And that is why some of us are asking. And for those who are talking about what Donald Trump, President of the United States, or the Pope are bringing to the table on this subject matter, they are saying, please understand that we have not done enough as a country to prove that we are really interested in solving this crisis, solving these challenges. If we are truly interested, we would have seen the correlation between these security breaches with food security. For some of us, there was a time, part of the reasons why I used to travel to Kebbi State was for me to come back with a lot of onions. It means that these people are no longer in a position to really farm the way they are supposed to farm, and that is why Katsina local government areas are now going into partnership with these people, entering into peace deals. And you'll see that this is becoming concerning for you to have the 16th Emir of Kano, the Khalifa, Sule Lamido Sanusi, going again to go and do some damage control. It means that we are really in dangerous times.
And talk to me about that particular situation, because the weekend visit to areas like Shanono, for instance, by the Emir of Kano, highlights a turning point in some regard, because Kano for quite some time has been insulated, despite the fact it shares borders with states like Katsina, for instance, which has become the epicenter of the banditry in the northwest. But we've seen over the last couple of weeks, in fact, residents in Shanono told our reporters that for the last 6 months, agrarian communities, pastoralists have not been able to do business because of the encroachment of some of these bandits. And the Emir re-echoed the need for those peace pacts, whatever they may contain, to get some sort of commitment that even if they're not going to attack communities in Katsina, they're not crossing over to Kano or other parts of the state to come and attack. I mean, I like the expression, there's no honor among thieves, and I think it applies in this context. Is it too much to expect these people to be honorable? I mean, what is the value of a peace deal with people who are willing to kill, maim, and destroy communities that are defenseless?
I think the next rider you should bring to bear is what is the honor in having a Nigerian police force that claims that you have a grassroots-oriented structure with representation in all the 774 local government areas, that claim you have a divisional police structure in each of the local governments at least, and some local governments do occasionally have 2-3 divisional police. How come you have a Nigerian police that has area commands and their current jurisdiction covers some of these local government areas and divisional police structures? How come you have somebody assigned and recognized and he blows siren and he has details going around with him serving as commissioner of police? How come you have the structure that says you have the zonal commands and you have an AIG? How come you have DIGs in charge of federal operations, in charge of criminal investigation? How come the Inspector General of Police has the Inspector General Special Team? And all these things are
You're saying
happening.
on paper this shouldn't be happening because we have covered all our bases? Is that what you're saying?
We have on paper, and there is statutory allocation, and I want to detail your security correspondent to kindly bring Nigerians to speed to prove me wrong that there is no statutory allocation for the jurisdiction that we are talking about in Kebbi, in Zamfara, in Katsina. How come you have the State Security Service, Department of State Service, supposedly having local government offices and establishment in those states? How come you have 20 out of 34 local governments in Katsina? And mind you, when you're talking about Katsina, we need to situate it correctly. Katsina State happens to be the state that is the home state of the following former heads of state commander-in-chief. Immediate past President Muhammadu Buhari, Umar Yar'Adua, former Chief of Staff Supreme Headquarters, General Musa Yar'Adua. Now, let us just stop at those three. Don't let us go beyond. You'll ask yourself, how come that state that has produced at least 2 presidents commander-in-chief will be going through this kind of security breaches and will be going through this kind of arrangement that 20 out of 34, 60%. It means that, let us bring it to the political frontier. It means minimum of 2 out of the 3 senators representing Katsina, their jurisdictions are affected with this. What are they doing here in Abuja? How many of the members of the Federal House of Representatives are affected? Earlier on, I was trying to draw the analogy with the fact that we have failed to situate these states within the Sahelo-Saharan conflict system, which they are brother. And this is where we believe that we need to start doing peer review mechanism. This governors forum that they are doing is not supposed for them to be talking and discussing grandstanding politics of one governor moving from one party to the other. They need to learn from Governor Bala Mohammed. Governor Bala Mohammed has accepted that when you look at all these issues that we are dealing with, it falls within the parameters of the Sahelo-Saharan conflict system, and this particular region is one of the underdeveloped. And if you are going to develop and have integrated national development, you will need to rise above and be mindful of the need to ensure that there is a connectivity between peace and development.
I don't know if you were able to, touch base with this particular development, but over the weekend, the military leader of Niger Republic, Abdurrahman Chiani, re-echoed the same sentiment, saying that, listen, what is happening in this part of the region is something that has been engineered to happen in this particular manner, and we have to accept that working together is a no-brainer. How much of what you're saying internally is something that is within the Nigerian control, and how much of the external geopolitical dimension can Nigeria only be a part of?
From my own understanding, about 95% of the issues that we are dealing with are local, domestic to the Nigerian state. And the easiest way to go in solving them is to apply our legal and policy frameworks. When you claim something happened and it is farmer-others clash, when you look at the penal code, there are 56 violations that are involved when you look at all the stories that have made the rounds. When you pick the criminal code, you have 78 violations, which ideally the Nigerian police ought to deploy their paraphernalia of office and ensure that thorough investigation is done that should lead to the apprehension of these criminals. When you do apprehend these criminals, the next thing you're supposed to do is to prosecute them. Yes, we do have a scheme dealing with violent extremism, which has been mismanaged. Mismanaged in the sense that you are talking about the need to consider granting some form of amnesty and rehabilitating these people. If you want to rehabilitate and you are interested in reintegrating them back to the society, there's a way you go about it. The first thing is they've committed crimes. How culpable are they within the confines of those crimes and criminalities that were associated with the incidents and episodes? But the painful aspect of it is that we do not do our due diligence. If they have done their due diligence, we will not be having the kind of episodes that are now, as it were, targeted at the security military establishment. What we just reported, and we are not paying so much attention to in the Northeast, how a brigade commander and some troops were ambushed. It will only take those who already know the modus operandi of the military. And mind you, and I'm yet to hear or read anywhere that this understanding has been debunked by the defense military establishment, that some of these past insurgents
have been integrated
into the armed forces. If they have been integrated, they already know the way you operate. They already are giving...
if that is the case, is this uncommon? Is Nigeria peculiar in this regard?
Nigeria is peculiar in the sense that rather than face the music and acknowledge that we are wrong, we would rather have some people wanting to grandstand and wish the problem away. I'll give you a good example. We are dealing with the Middle East. The locus classical, when you want to discuss subject matters of this nature, is to look at what is happening in Gaza. Every Palestinian and all the critical leaders of the Arab world acknowledge the fact that Hamas has done wrong, even though they may find it difficult to come into public domain to discuss that this is wrong of Hamas to have done, blah, blah, blah. They will rather keep it quiet, and that is why you will discover that they signed off on the peace deal that was proposed by the United States and brokered. Meanwhile, you remember that President Trump gave an extreme agenda that we would level up Gaza and we'll turn it to a Riviera, we'll turn it to a paradise estate where the rich and all those who really want can come and have a piece of the action there. And they are now saying, no, we can't allow that. We have citizens that are Palestinians in that jurisdiction. It is unfortunate that we all assumed that Hamas will change if given the opportunity to govern and administer Gaza. But now they did not even allow for periodic elections. If they did not allow for periodic elections and they equally took all the resources that was donated to them and converted them to weaponization, to digging trenches, to digging bunkers and things like that, and having military hardware for them to be able in one day to shoot into Israel over 1,000 rockets. It means that these people have done wrong. And since we cannot trust that they will not go back, we will rather have a situation that we are going to recalibrate the entire understanding. And this is what we need to agree in Nigeria. And if we agree that some of these crime-prone individuals, security-concerned individuals that we are labeling bandits and not acknowledging that they are criminals, we will be in a position to say, okay, we will do a thorough profiling, we will do a psychoanalysis of these individuals and know which one can truly be allowed to go.
So bandit as a classification, in your view, is mild compared to a terrorist classification?
The dictionary definition of a bandit means that is a known outlaw. That means...
I mean, they appear known if you look at the...
Is a known outlaw, and it means for you to be an outlaw, you are crime-prone and you are a security risk person. Unfortunately, and this is where it becomes very interesting, the Nigerian state has what is called the National Security Strategy. That phrase bandit was mentioned, but the Nigeria's National Security Strategy has a weakness. The weakness is that it does not annotate the National Security Strategy with the legal and policy frameworks. So if somebody you want to cover up with a label of bandit, that English definition, dictionary definition says is an outlaw, is known, means that you should be able to say this man is a criminal, and as such, what are the crimes he commits? Like in this case, some of their leaders are involved in planning, and they have foot soldiers that go to execute. They plan to the extent that they have cells all over the place, sleeper cells. And these are known. And as such, if that person is involved in planning and sponsoring and coordinating the operations of cells, it does not mean that if you pick him today and you say you want to wash him and give him the kind of uniform that they have been giving to them in the Northeast, and you allow him to be eating proper meals, and you give them stipend. Meanwhile, the ordinary citizens that were displaced by their criminal activities were sent to displacement camps, IDPs. as IDPs.
So in a nutshell, if I get you correctly, you think the government's approach is one of appeasement. You get the sense that we're rewarding bad behavior.
We are rewarding bad behavior. And for me, it's time that we need to begin to say, where do they draw the inspiration from? Where do they draw the pool of their foot soldiers from? They draw from the less privileged. Mind you, a number of them, the poor school enrollment in those communities means that they cannot easily be employed. And that is why we need to say, what are the lessons that we can learn from a state like Bauchi, where they are increasing the agricultural production capacity and bringing a number of these individuals that ought to have become foot soldiers to the criminals.
Right.
They are now saying, come to the farm, you are involved in farming. You now say, okay, get involved as part of the local indigenous structure for security, be part of what is called the vigilante system, and then they are no longer going to be available to the enemy to use.
Right. Let's take a quick look at the Kebbi situation, the Maga abduction at that federal government girls comprehensive school, and just give you a sense of what's been happening. I mean, you see it's pretty much in the middle of a densely populated area. For such an attack to happen in this particular manner obviously means that the security gaps or the lapses have actually been factored into the attack, right? But earlier on you talked about the Safe School Initiative. Where is it? How come this, like the Yauri attack, like the Dapchi attack, like the Chibok attack back in 2014, is still happening? What in your view is a holistic approach towards this? Is this one of those cases where we have to talk about more deployment? Because we can't surely expect to have security across thousands, even hundreds of thousands of primary and secondary schools across this country.
It will appear as if I was patronizing the media group Trust earlier on. I'll kindly plead with the gentleman that had done this work, this geospatial mapping, to kindly identify the police formations in this particular jurisdiction and to plot the distance between this government secondary school Maga and the government comprehensive girls school Maga to the nearest police formations. And you'll be shocked that it is within reach, which leads us to the next aspect of my intervention. Sir, it beats my imagination to see people claim that they took the oath of allegiance to the Nigerian state and are wearing uniform of the Nigerian police, and they are not upbeat. It beats my imagination that some people claim, and I'll ask your security person, correspondent, to do this investigation as well. We need to bring them to book on some of these things. How much has been earmarked and spent on the Safe School Initiative for Kebbi State, so that we can begin to put all these things in perspective? You cannot claim that you are doing these kind of things and then you are having security breaches. And last week that this happened, and this is where psychoanalysis of crime and criminalities and of groups involved in this kind of things need to be brought to bear. And I want to believe that my brother and very good friend, Dr. Abdullahi Ahmed, was trying to speak to this, but he was being very careful. And that is the fact that this last week, we focused a lot of attention on the partisan politics and grandstanding of how to emasculate, how to suffocate the opposition called the PDP. If you are focusing on that, these criminals already know that you are a totalitarian regime. And one of the few things that they will need to do is to take advantage of such a thing. So you can no longer afford to have a situation where you will spend more time as a totalitarian regime. And I'm ready to label this government the way it is supposed to be labeled. The incumbent APC-led administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a totalitarian regime, and that is why
you think it ticks all the boxes of a totalitarian?
It does, and
government?
that is why they are involved in strategic distraction. They are involved in strategic desensitization. That is why they concentrate on the minors and lessen their attention on the majors. If they were serious, this kind of security breaches would not be happening. For example, the Northeast, where we have military officers abducted, Ministry of Defense losing people. You will recall that the newly appointed and sworn in, inaugurated Chief of Army Staff went to the locus inco to the theater to go and encourage his people. The aftermath is what we are dealing with. We need to start connecting the dots and calling them out to say, please, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, kindly tell your aides, enough is enough of all the noise making about 2027. If we can focus on governance, then we will make headway. It is not about you sending a special assistant or a special advisor to Plateau State. And at the same time that all this was taking place, your President of the Senate of the Federal Republic was in Plateau State to go receive the campees from PDP into APC. For crying aloud.
You don't think that they care enough, political leaders care enough about the death, about the destruction, about the apprehension that Nigerians live with day by day?
I doubt, because I still recall that the incumbent president reluctantly visited Benue State. And on the day he visited Benue State, the children from schools were mobilized to line the streets in a state where they are mourning. That is a misnomer. That is an abnormality for a president who is supposed to be the father of the nation going to a state where there is gross mourning taking place. And then you will expect people to line up and be waving flags at you and appear to be smiling. It is wrong. When you got to the meeting, at a particular stage, you called on your appointed Inspector General of Police to hold a banter with him. What has become of that banter? Dr. Inspector General of Police, Ebetokun, what has become of Benue? You need to let Nigerians know.
You think there is a lot of talk and very little work?
Very little work. Because by now, not a single security breach should be happening around those jurisdictions. It is now taking the Nigerian Navy saying we are going to establish an headquarter forward base in Benue. For crying aloud, internal security operations is the exclusive preserve of the Nigerian police. And painfully, I need to put this on the table in public domain again. It is only in Nigeria that the Constitution, the 1999 Constitution, is operated in aberration. For the President Commander-in-Chief to fail to convene the Nigerian Police Council meeting and be discussing policing matters at the Economic Council, it is a misnomer. It is unfortunate.
Okay. We have to go in 10 seconds or less, if you can. We've seen some political abductions. We've seen some political attacks in Zamfara and in other parts of the country. Do you worry that ahead of 2027, these banditry activities could engulf the political atmosphere next year in the build-up to 2027?
These security breaches, if there's a continuity in politics of grandstanding, partisan politics of grandstanding, will not only escalate, it may consume, and unless it is part of their totalitarian agenda that they do not want to hold elections in 2027, they will allow these security breaches to continue to occur.
Dr. Ayokunle Fagbemi, thank you so much for the analysis. I appreciate you very much for stopping by this evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time. And that is a wrap on tonight's edition of the program. Daily Politics returns tomorrow live at 8 p.m. On behalf of the team, my name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Thank you for your time. We'll see you next time.